Hi guys, how you doing? This is Ben, the Real Estate Pro, coming at you, hopefully going to kick you some knowledge. So I want to do a video today on something I don't hear a lot of people talking about. We're just about 3 weeks away or so from from Sitzer Burnett and all the changes that the NAR settlement is going to be putting on agents. Um, I'm already seeing MLSs change. I'm seeing associations change. I'm seeing brokerages change, implementing new rules in order to be able to comply with a NAR settlement. But there is one thing I just don't hear a lot of agents talking about. And that one thing is buyer's agent commissions. I mean, they're talking about it, but they're not talking about it in the context of how much it really affects the ability of your buyer or the strength of the offer that you'll be submitting to a seller, and how much of an effect the agreed upon commission might have on your offer actually getting accepted. So if you're a buyer and watching this video, you want to pay some special attention in my opinion. So on your screen, as you're seeing, I just, this is my high-tech way of doing things here. It's just a Word document and just a PDF actually that I put together really quick. And it's a very basic offer, okay, to kind of illustrate my point. Now, if you see the top one here where it says, and I'll see if I can zoom in a little bit. I'm not sure if I can, to be honest with you. Okay, here we go. I'll see if I can zoom in on offer one. So this is offer one. Hopefully you guys can see it. And I'm using some very simple numbers. And I'm not using all the closing costs per se, but I'm trying to get you guys to take into account the net of the seller, because when you sell anything, especially if you're selling a home, at the end of the day the seller is going to be looking at, what am I getting after I pay everybody, what am I netting out of everything, right? And that's really the number that a seller's agent should be looking at, and a seller. Okay, so we're just going to talk about basic numbers. I understand that there might be some other costs involved, but we just want to talk specifically about commissions. Okay, so an offer one. So let's say you have a house on the market. You're a listing agent or you're a seller. Let's just say. Uh, I use a nice round number of 500,000. I know in some markets that's a lot of money. In other markets there aren't any houses that are for sale for 500,000. Certainly that is the case when you're out in California somewhere, at least in areas that I'm from. So typically, let's say that you have a $500,000 purchase price. You have a seller's agent commission of 2.5 and a buyer's agent commission of 2.5, which is about 12,500 each. Okay, and I'm not going to talk about whether you should send it through the seller or send it through a cooperative buyer's agency agreement. That's really not the purpose of this video. But in this particular scenario, if a seller, regardless, if they're paying for all the commissions, um, in this particular case, which is about 25 grand, and if the purchase price is 500,000, well, that particular seller is netting about 475,000 minus whatever closing costs that they may have to pay. And let's just, for the sake of this video, let's just say that the closing costs are exactly the same. Okay, so I don't have to put a number up there. Whatever is X, it's the same as all the other scenarios here. So if you have the seller actually paying the buyer's agent commission, they're having to pay $12,500 to the buyer's agent and $12,500 to the seller's agent, and that's how it's been done for about the last 100 years. Okay. Um, Now we're going into a little bit of a change. So now what agents have to think about, because most agents are kind of trying to keep things the same, or they're thinking, hey, commissions aren't really going to change. But I think when buyers realize a few key points here that I'll talk about here, we may see some price compression on the buyer side. I'm not saying for sure. I think so personally, but I think there are going to be some very creative models out there that are going to come to fruition, that are going to appear, and that are drastically going to bring down what you might compensate a buyer's agent. So let's say that you find an agent that will go ahead, and maybe they have a different business model. Maybe they have a flat fee business model. In this particular case, we're going to talk about offer two. We're talking about the same house, and these are two offers that are on the house. Now, the first one, 2.5% for the buyer's agent. Everything else is the same, 2.5 for the seller's agent, and this is their net. Now offer number two, let's say that you're a seller just looking at these two offers, same purchase price. You're paying your seller agent the same thing, but the buyer agent is only requesting 5 grand. Now I just used a nice round number, okay? Well, now that's going to net the seller 482,500 minus closing costs. So what that should tell you is you as a buyer and as a buyer's agent, if our goal is to get an offer accepted, okay? And especially as a buyer, what you pay your agent could make or break your deal. That's just not something we've ever had to think about before until now. Buyers never had to worry about commissions. The seller paid all that. There's an argument that the buyer pays all commissions because they're the ones coming out with the money, but I digress. That's not the purpose of this particular video. But think about that for a second. If you're a buyer, you're like, well, wait a minute. In this scenario, which offer do you think the seller is going to take? Do you think they're going to go ahead and say, well, yeah, I'll go ahead and take the offer where I'm paying more to the buyer's agent and I'm netting less? Or am I going to go with the offer that actually I don't have to pay as much to the buyer's agent and I'm netting a significant amount of money more? Well, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to look at that and go, well, yeah, the seller more than likely, maybe not in all cases, but if these two offers are exactly the same, let's talk about, the borrower is, or the buyer is just as qualified. Everything is identical. And the only differences are what the seller is netting. The seller's going to go with the higher net. So buyers have to really think about this a little bit, okay? Now let's go ahead and take this a step forward because, see, my philosophy as far as being your agent, as a buyer's agent, and representing you as a buyer is not only to find you a property, everybody does that, but I want to get your offer accepted. So I want to get very creative about what we can do to maximize the chances of a seller looking at your offer and going, you know what, this is better than any other offer I have, and to accept that offer and for you to get the house. That is my primary goal. I certainly have other goals, but that is my primary goal, to get you the house that you wish to buy. Okay? So in this particular scenario, okay, we're going with offer number one, and let's just say that the seller is offering a 3% buyer compensation to the buyer's agent. Okay? So we have a $500,000 purchase price. Seller's getting 2.5%. So they're netting $12,500, and the buyer's agent is being offered $15,000. Okay? Wow, I think my thing just went off. There we go. So anyway, sorry about that. Lights went off a little bit. So in this particular case, we have an offer, this offer number one with the 3% buyer compensation. So the seller in this case, just for the sake of trying to illustrate this point here, the seller is offering a buyer 3% to pay their buyer's agent. So in this particular case, $500,000 purchase price, selling agent's getting 2.5, which is $12,500. Buyer's agent's getting 15,000. Boy, this seller's really motivated, right? And the net to the seller will be 472,500. All right? And that's kind of how we do things now. But what we really have to think about now is, let's say that the agreed upon buyer broker compensation is $5,000. Okay? In a lot of states, what's going on right now, I know in Colorado, they're making the paperwork as far as the buyer broker compensation. They're making it nearly impossible for buyer's agents to increase the amount that's agreed upon. Okay, so you're kind of stuck with whatever you agree to with your seller or your buyer in this case. If you agree to 5,000, 10,000, 2%, 3%, whatever you agree to, that's what you have to work for. Okay. So let's just say in this particular case, we have an agreed upon buyer broker compensation with the buyer of $5,000, but the seller is offering $15,000. So we call that a total overage or compensation overage of $10,000. So what happens to that $10,000? Well, because we are the client's fiduciary, okay, and it is our fiduciary duty to look out for our client and to present them the best scenario possible, okay. There are a few scenarios that we want to think about, okay. So let's look at scenario number one. Purchase price is still 500,000. The seller agent still, okay, is getting paid 2.5. Now the buyer comp, because it's been agreed upon even before we open the door to this house, okay. I mean, even before we, and possibly even before we even knew this house existed, okay, the buyer's agency fee is $5,000. So what we can do with that extra $10,000 that we have up here, this total overage, is we can go ahead and go back to the seller and say, hey, listen, we'll go ahead and give you the 500,000. Obviously, the seller agent commission is going to stay the same, uh, but we want the buyer's agent commission to be 5,000, and we would like for you to give us a seller concession of $10,000 so my buyer can get some help with some closing costs. Well, that's pretty powerful because I mean that's 3% that was already being offered by the seller, and they're netting, if you see that, the exact same number. I mean, that's pretty powerful. So if you're working with the right agent, if you're working with an agent that understands fiduciary duty, that is not trying to line their own pockets, because it is possible, and this would be the sign of a bad agent if you ask me, it is possible that the agent may go back to you and say, hey, listen, um, I know we agreed to 5,000, but the seller's offering 15, and the seller's paying it, so can we change our agreement to $15,000? Now, a buyer might be like, well, yeah, I mean, I guess the seller's offering it, so yeah, it's not coming out of my pocket. Well, it sort of is. See, there's this concept called informed consent, okay? And because we are the fiduciary and the buyer in this case is our client, we have to look out for them. And we have to present them with all the scenarios or all the things that could happen with this $10,000. Okay? Not try and be self-serving and take it all. So it's our duty to go over some other scenarios like we did in scenario one. Because yeah, we got our 5,000, which is what we agreed to do the job for anyway. And like I said, in some states, they're making it almost impossible to increase this number. But we got, instead of us getting paid that 3%, which is what was offered, we converted over to a seller concession. Okay? That actually helps our client. All right? So we would present them, hey, this is scenario one. This is what we could do with that overage. Scenario two, same purchase price, seller agent's getting the same thing, buyer's agent's getting the same thing, but we could refund the 10 grand back to the seller if we needed to. Now, in this particular case, you might ask the question, why would you do that? Well, if you're in a highly competitive situation where there's multiple offers on a property, well, you just increased the seller's net without increasing the purchase price for your buyer. Okay? That's pretty powerful to do. I mean, in a lot of cases, what might happen, and I know certainly in the past what a lot of agents would do, if they needed seller concessions for their buyer, they'd increase the purchase price. Well, and what that means is there's a whole bunch of other problems that could transpire from doing that. Number one, maybe your client might not qualify for the loan anymore. I mean, sometimes you're on a razor's edge when it comes to qualification and mortgages. I've certainly, since I'm a loan officer, I've certainly seen that happen. Um, and then, on top of that, what if the property doesn't appraise for that number? So in this particular scenario, in this particular situation, you don't have to worry about any of that. Okay? Now let's go to scenario number three. Same purchase price once again. Seller's agent's getting the same amount. Buyer's agent's getting what they agreed to do. And instead of asking for maybe a seller concession, instead of maybe refunding it back to the seller, you can ask for a reduction in price. So instead of 500,000, you go to 490,000, and the net to the seller stays exactly the same. If you ask me, this is a whole new paradigm change now. And it's very powerful if you really think about it. And if you are an agent like me who understands what fiduciary duty is, because unfortunately And we all know this. Okay, if you're an agent, you know exactly what I'm talking about. There are a lot of agents out there that aren't the most honest in the world. Okay, so you want to find an agent that is going to work with you as a buyer. And maybe you don't have a lot of funds. Maybe you just have a minimal amount of funds, as far as, to try and buy a house, and to pay a buyer's agent $12,500 extra on top of your closing costs. That can be a lot of money for a lot of people, and it might even take you out of contention on buying a property. But if you find an agent that understands the new climate and that wants to work with buyers and can be very creative and can introduce some other ways of looking at things, some other ways, other strategies that will benefit you, because you're the boss, okay? If there's any extra money in a situation like we have here, where we have an overage, that money is yours, Mr. Buyer, Mrs. Buyer, Ms. Buyer. You should decide what to do with it. As long as I'm getting compensated, or an agent is getting compensated, what we agreed to in the first place, you should make the decision on what happens to that overage or that money. Now, you can, if you like, you can say, hey, you know what? Ben, you did a great job. We love how you handled the situation. Yeah, we'll go ahead and give that overage to you. You can still do that. Now, I would never recommend that. If there's a way for me to take that $10,000 or that whatever that overage amount is and it benefit you, that's what I'm going to want to do. But you certainly can do that. There's nothing stopping you from doing that. So if you're looking for an agent that understands this concept, okay, this is my website. And this is my buyer's agency services for the state of California. Now, I'm also licensed in the state of Arizona. I could probably do something similar. I'm just not quite set up in Arizona for it yet, but I will be very soon. So if you are in Arizona, you're watching this video, today is let's see, it's July 24th, 2024. Still give me a call, still contact me. Now, I want to talk a little bit about my website. This is my menu of services, and I have kind of an a la carte buyer services type of situation. Now, we do have traditional buyer's agency services, which is the normal kind of buyer's agency. Okay. We have offer and contract negotiations. All right. And what that is it's mainly for people that are maybe a little more savvy or have found a property that they want to buy and they want to put in an offer. Perhaps you went to an open house. Perhaps maybe you might have stumbled across a property or whatnot. Maybe you have a family member that's trying to sell a property and you just need guidance as far as getting the contract done, getting all the inspections done, getting everything you need done in a professional manner and get you to closing on that particular property. An offer and contract negotiations is something you may definitely want to think about and we can certainly discuss. And then I have something called buyer's choice. Now this is a completely negotiable type of thing, okay? And if you have a particular idea of what you need as far as real estate services, perhaps you only need a certain piece done, maybe you just need a transaction done, perhaps all you need is a contract. I am willing to look at any type of scenario that you may need that I can provide services for. So give me a call and I'd be more than happy to discuss it. So here are my buyer's agency services. Now my premier buyer's agency services is a flat fee, $69.95 flat fee. Now what we do here is we do showing coordinations, contract services, buyer's representation, etc. It includes everything in the offer and contract negotiations. We'll help you find the home. If you want to put in an offer, we'll take you all the way through closing, take care of everything for you as far as inspections, negotiations, all those things like we talked about here, as I illustrated in my little video here. Offer and contract negotiations, if that's all you need, nice flat fee of $49.95, and that's all you pay. Okay. Now these fees are for every $1 million in purchase price. So if you have a $1,500,000 property, okay, then that would be obviously a little bit more, but it's still a tremendous savings off of 2.5%, what you're going to see out there. And as far as our buyer's choice, like I talked about, that's completely negotiable. It's kind of whatever you want to do. We'll figure out what I need to do, and we'll come to a number. We'll shake hands, and we'll get it done. Like I said before, guys, My primary job is to find the property that you're looking for and to get your offer accepted. And I have strategies that will accomplish that. And me also being a mortgage loan officer, there are things I know about lending that the average agent just isn't going to know. So that's a competitive advantage to you because when we put an offer into a seller, we want to put in the strongest offer possible. And I think my particular model, I think it's the best deal out there. So if you want to give me a shot, feel free to give me a call. You can certainly give me a call here. Let me just go ahead and go to my contacts here. So these are my phone numbers, and you can go to my website. And this website is bvsellsaz or bvsellsca.com. My phone number in California is 619-752-4030. My phone number in Arizona is 480-466-0780. Now this video is more information for really or home buyers or home sellers even that are in California. However, I can certainly assist you if you're in Arizona. And I have other services that, this video is getting a little long, that I have as well, that I would be more than happy to discuss with you. But anyways, guys, this has been the Real Estate Pro. Hopefully you learned something, and we'll talk to you next time.